Kevin, thanks for joining us for the Culture Catalyst interview series. I'm very excited to hear from you because I know you have been very intentional about creating an amazing culture here in Alamo Heights. So tell us a little bit about why you chose to work in education.
Wow, that's a big question, right? And I think it's personal for anybody that goes into education. I worked for a lot of, or grew up with a lot of educators. My mom was a teacher.
Really?
My father was a minister and a teacher. And my grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse. And so I think to some degree it was always in my DNA to do something that was in a giving profession. But I always said I wasn't going to be a teacher. But I had a band director of all things. I was working with kids one time, and he said, you know, you ought to be a teacher one day. And that stuck in the back of my head. And then I was a camp counselor when I was in college. And I worked with kids, and I really enjoyed it. I just loved it. And I had a roommate and at the time, and I was going to go to law school. I had applied and I got accepted, and it was the night before it was a deadline. I hadn't sent in the paperwork, and they had left a message saying, if we don't hear from you tomorrow, you're not going to be able to go. So my roommate, I came in at midnight, he said, Kevin, you need to do the paperwork. And I said, oh yeah, I'll do that tomorrow. He said, can I be honest with you? I think your heart is not in this. I think you need to be a teacher. Wow. So we stayed up all night talking about it, and the next morning I decided to be a teacher. And I've never gone back. I'm so glad I made that decision, and I think attorneys have a very honorable profession, but I don't think anything's more noble than being an educator. And so that's why I went into the profession, and I'm really proud of my profession.
So tell us about a story about when you were a young teacher. What's something that comes to mind about your time when you first got in?
Well, there's a ton of them, right? But I'm going to tell you about the first period of the first day of my teaching career. And I was at an urban school, high school, and I was standing out in front of my classroom and welcoming kids in, like I knew I was supposed to do. And there was a student walking down the hallway who was pretty scary looking. He looked older than me. He was definitely bigger than me. And he walked into my classroom, and I was mortified because I thought, this is not a good first day. And I had said good morning to him, and he kind of brusquely walked by. And I went to his desk, and I talked to him. And I asked him about himself, I asked him what he did, and I got to have a little bit of a personal relationship in 2 minutes. I went and checked roll, and some kids were talking in the back. I'm very nervous, first day of school, and this student stands up and says, y'all be quiet, Mr. Brown is talking, and he's my bro, and you don't mess with my bro.
Wow.
And so that sounds really hokey and corny, but he was a really neat kid who struggled in every other class with every other teacher, and I learned immediately what I intuitively knew, which is that relationships matter first. He ended up going to college. He was in special ed. He didn't know the first thing about college. I had 42 kids in that class, and I had 34 desks. But it ended up being this phenomenal class, and I think it started with that first conversation and reaching out and trying not to judge a child by the way he looked or even the way he acted, but to try to develop that relationship first, because that laid the groundwork for us to do some really amazing academic work later. For me, the educational experience is always about relationships first, and then coming in and developing the other experiences for kids. So that was just the very first start, but it was the very first moment of my teaching career, and it was a big lesson.
I love that story so much. So we're going to go back even further now.
Okay.
What kind of student were you?
Yeah, so I was a good student. I was a teacher pleaser. I worked hard in school. I was involved in a lot of extracurriculars. So in athletics, I was a basketball player and a very serious tennis player, but I was also in the band and the choir. And so I melded both athletics and music. And those really got me excited about school. I don't know that I was always driven by a passion to learn until later in high school. About the time I became a junior in high school, I really was turned on by learning. I was a fidgety kid. Probably by today's standards, I was ADHD. So I would move quite a bit. I had a hard time staying focused in class, but I learned a lot of coping skills. And I had a lot of really good teachers who were very caring of me and of my classmates. I always feel very fortunate about that. And I had parents who were completely, I got unconditional love from them. So I really loved school. And I think one of the attractions for me of coming to school was that I loved it, and that I wanted to be in that environment, and I wanted kids to love it. And it wasn't until later that I realized, actually, not all kids love school, because I did, and it worked for me. But I actually think some of our best teachers are kids that didn't love it, right? And so, but for me, I did, and I always want that for my students and for everybody in our district. So I love the school environment. I love everything about it, and so it's been a passion, and it's been so great to be a part of, frankly.
That's great. So you would have benefited from these chairs.
I would have loved these chairs. I would have been all about these chairs. I still, to this day, if I have a stationary chair, I will lean back in it every single time because I can't sit still, and I like to move a lot, and I think a lot of our kids do. And that's what's neat about this classroom environment is it gives that flexibility to students so that they can be in a place that's comfortable for them. And not all kids want to move, but a lot of them do. And those that don't, they don't have to.
Right.
But those that do, they can learn quite a bit while they're moving around. So
tell us a little bit about that, like the way that you got to where you are now with these kinds of classrooms. What is that all about, the engaged classrooms?
So for us, we've been on this decade-long journey to really not reform our school district. We had a school district that was excellent in so many traditional measures. It was a very traditional school, but it was a very successful school in a great community. So there wasn't anything broken. The only thing is that we felt like we weren't staying up with the times, and that we weren't putting our best foot forward to really help students be successful in the 21st century. And so we've been on this long learning journey together with our staff and our parents and our community, our board, administrative team, talking about how can we get better? How can we not reform but transform? Because we really have to transform the experience. And so we have spent a long time thinking as designers, really being designers of engaging experiences that result in profound learning. That's been our mantra for a decade now. That's not an easy thing to do, and it didn't happen overnight, but we went through a strategic planning process, and student engagement was a huge part of that strategic planning process of making sure that we were able to take care of initiatives in our district. But we also went through a process of developing a profile of a learner, and that happened just a couple of years ago. And that was dealing with the characteristics and attributes that we want for our students. It's a very student-facing document, and in fact, students help to create the document. And it deals with things like developing a healthy sense of self, and thinking creatively and critically, and communicating, collaborating, all the things we hear as catchphrases. But for us, like, we want to see it in action. And so, but we also know that teaching is a very autonomous activity. It can be. We've all been teachers. We can close the door. We can do whatever we want to do at the end of the day. So as superintendent, I really don't have much direct impact on what happens in the classroom. So what I can do is impact the culture, and I can impact the resources and the support that we give to teachers. And much like I want teachers to design an engaging experience that compels students to want to do the work, we have to design an engaging experience that compels teachers to want to do this work. And because at the end of the day, your students want to be successful, they want to learn, your teachers want to learn, they are passionate about their kids, and they want to do the best they can. So you have to go in with that assumption that teachers are there for the right reasons, and with the right culture and the right resources, they're going to thrive. And so for us, this putting that profile of a learner into action is where we worked with you guys and Engage to Learn, was just trying to develop a blueprint for learning. So we needed to develop that blueprint, which helped us to really rethink what we do in the classroom. And so we're sitting in a classroom right now that was built in 1911. Like these same walls, over 100 years old,
So
we have kids that were able to, if you look at pictures of this classroom, the kids are all in straight rows. The teacher's holding a ruler. The kids all have a slate, a chalk slate. And you know what? That was the best that we had to offer at that time. And my guess is the teacher loved the kids and she wanted to help them be successful. But what was effective in 1911 is not effective today. So how do you take this beautiful building, which is again built in 1911, how do you get that to transform to provide the experiences that our kids are going to need to be successful in the 21st century? Like, we're 17 years into the 21st century, right?
That's
Like
right.
it's in something that's in the future, like we're in
It's
it now. And so we had the opportunity for our teachers to help us develop an ideal classroom that provides the flexibility that they need to be able to change on a moment's notice the work that they're going to do. So if you're in a traditional classroom, 30 desks, teacher in the front, it is very hard to be engaging. It's hard to design engaging experiences. It's hard to learn at a deep level, frankly, because it's the teacher giving information to kids. The kids are passive learners. They take a test. They maybe remember 10% of it a week later, right? And how do I know that? Because if you gave me a calculus test today, I did well in calculus. In college, I couldn't tell you the first thing about it today because none of the experiences I had of learning were really authentic to me. They weren't hands-on. I listened, I took notes, I took the test, it was gone. This is a much more hands-on approach for kids. It has to be. So we want to give our teachers the environment in which to do that. So everything's movable in this classroom. The flooring, we have hard, soft flooring, which is it's quiet when you move things around. It works really well. We've given teachers one-to-one technology. But the most important thing is not to give them technology. It's like this is not about the technology. This is about the design of engaging experiences. Sometimes technology is needed for that, and sometimes it's not needed for that. But teachers need to have that tool when it is needed. And so they have that, and they use it quite a bit, but they don't use it all the time, and I don't expect them to. So the furniture is built for collaboration, for kids that have different needs. So you can sit, you can stand, you can be in a stool that rocks, you can be in a beanbag chair. There may be times when the teacher needs to pull a small group. Even our bookcases on wheels so that you can move your reading groups around. And so that flexibility changes the dynamic of the classroom and allows the teacher to do things that are much more student-directed, much more hands-on learning than they would otherwise. And the result is that our kids love it, right? And they're able to do the hands-on work. And the fact is, the teachers love it because they see what it does for kids. And it's just an exciting environment to be in. And so the rewarding thing for me is I think a lot of times as administrators, we're up here talking about the work, right? And we talk and we have great talks and we think about it and we're real proud of ourselves. But the question is, does anything change in the classroom?
So true.
And if it doesn't change in the classroom, then really I haven't done my job. But I can't make it change in the classroom by telling people what to do. It just is not going to happen. Because as soon as I walk out of the room or the principal walks out of the room, teachers are going to revert back to what they're most comfortable with and what they're able to do given the constraints that they have. And so my job is to create a culture where we give teachers the time and the support to rethink and redesign the work that they do. This classroom is one iteration that helps them to get there. It's not a requirement by any means. Like you could do engaging work without this, but it is one less impediment. And so is technology. Like you don't have to have technology to be engaging. You don't have to have technology. It's not innovative in and of itself, but it is one less impediment when you have it, right? And so that's one extra tool you give your kids and your teachers to learn at a profound level. And so that's a big part of this whole rollout. The other part of this that has been really important for us is to do it on a small scale. And so we always talk about go slow to go fast. So I have 400 classrooms in the district. We did this in 17 classrooms. And it starts with teachers wanting to do it, right? It's it's about giving them a ton of professional development with an instructional coach who's at their side helping them to rethink and redesign their experiences in their classroom. And that's where y'all have been a huge help, is helping us coach our coaches, right? And help us coach our teachers. And to think about that collaborative process that goes on, because what we have to do is move teachers from where it's just about them being in an autonomous classroom to being in a collaborative environment where they're learning from each other about how to do things even better. Now, the only way you can do that is to have safety from adverse consequences, right? So as soon as a teacher tries something innovative and it falls flat, like, we've got to be there and say, hey, that's okay. Like, we appreciate that you tried that, and it's okay if it doesn't work. It's okay if your test scores don't turn out well. It's okay. We want you to use best practices, keep being creative, keep being innovative. How can we help? What can we do? And to be a guide on their side, right? Just like we want our teachers to be a guide on the side of our students. So we're not telling them what to do. We're just providing that culture in which to do it. And everybody wants to be a part of that kind of culture, right? And so we talk about if you mess up, fess up. Like, we do that all the time. Like, we've had things that we've done in professional development that just didn't go as well as we wanted. So we try to model that in our professional development. So we'll have design days in our district where every teacher is out and about, all of them sitting down in a team designing engaging work for kids and talking through that. What does this look like? We ask them, take your worst assignment that you give. Like, everybody's got a terrible assignment, right? It's probably a worksheet. So bring that worksheet and let's talk about, hey, how can we make that worksheet an engaging lesson? Like, everybody's got that, so it's not threatening. Now we can talk through that and redesign that in a way that now you get immediate success. And there's no judgment. We're not going around going, shame on you for doing that. It's more trying to affirm great work when we see it. So we're real big on affirming really good work when we see it.
Culture. So give us, what are the 5 things that when you walk in classrooms or in professional learning or in one of your meetings or whatever, what would we expect to see in terms of the culture and how that's playing out in the environment?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that first student in the first period of my day, which is I really think it starts with relationships, right? So I have to know the people I work with, and they have to know each other, and there has to be a culture of love and respect and kindness, and I have to model that in everything I do. I have to know people's names, I have to know about their lives, and they have to know about each other's, because if we can be in a culture where we all know each other and trust each other, great things can happen. But if we don't, then everybody's always not sure, right? And so that's one of the things that I think has been really key. The other is to do joint learning together, right? So you're going to see a lot of learning in our school district. It's sharing of articles, it's having conversations, it's having usually disciplined conversations around something. So we'll facilitate a conversation around some important topic. And ask very intentional questions, right? Like, why did you do this? And I want people to ask me that. So when I go around, I'm on campuses every week. I coach with every principal every week. So I'm with them, and I expect them to push on me. Like, ask me why I'm doing something, and if I'm ever in your way from you doing the work that we talk about, then I need to know about it. And so they'll tell me, it's like, why do we have this end of year report? Like, it does nothing for me and my campus. Like, that's a good question. We need to rethink, why do we do the end of year report? So I got to remove that bureaucracy from them when I can, right? There's some things you just have to do, but a lot of things we have to rethink how we do it. So I would say there's a million little micro conversations that we have around our district constantly, and that starts with me not being in my office.
Yeah. For sure.
Right, so I have to be out on campuses. So when I go to a campus, I go out and visit classrooms. I look, not with judgment, but I look, I ask questions, I hear about what's going on, and I affirm really good work. That's kind of my role. That's what I expect principals to do too. Be out and about, have conversations with teachers, one that's done out of love and kindness and respect, but one that also is about learning. So I don't come out and say, oh, hey, by the way, this is the best way to teach science. Like, that's, and that you have to be humble enough to know that you don't know squat, right? You think you know a lot, but you really don't.
Yeah.
So just learn with people along the way. People will ask questions, say, I don't know the answer to that, let's figure it out. Like, I think that's a good place to start. And I think that gives you a culture of we're all in this together. And so that's been a really good thing. I will just say, I want to go back to the affirmation part. I've really felt like that if you believe that people want to do a great job, and then you have to affirm the work that they're doing. Like, nobody wants to be in an environment where all they are told is what they're doing wrong. And so we tend to frame things, oh, I really like this, I really like that. If we see great work, we want to profile it, so we do these spotlights on engagement. Well, we'll go in and video a teacher doing great work. We'll recognize them at a board meeting, that kind of thing. We do a spotlight on excellence, and we do a lot of that. And with social media, that's easy to do.
That's right.
And I think most teachers in public education will say they don't get enough affirmation of the work they do. So go out and find really great work and affirm that, because that contributes to the culture in your district that says, we like that.
Yep.
Like, that's work and that's encouraging and people want to do that. And so I think you'll see that. I think that you'll see a lot of what do kids think about this? How did this work for kids? Were they excited about it? Did they learn? That kind of thing. And so when I walk around the school district, what I hope to see is kids that are pretty happy, that are working really hard, but they're doing the work. They're aware of the work that they're doing and why they're doing the work. Like, they have it's really funny. We had this conversation with an 8-year-old the other day, and the principal said, well, you know, what were you thinking about when you were doing that? And what were the thoughts? Have you ever thought about that? And he goes, you mean metacognition? You know, like, that's metacognition, right? So, like, yeah. So not many 8-year-olds can frame that, but I think our teachers talk about that a lot and have our kids think about the thinking that they're doing and how they learn. And I think you saw in our student panel today that the kids are pretty aware of how they learn, of the intention that went behind these classrooms. And so that part, I think, has been transformational for us. And so I use this example, like, in our world today, the corporate world, business world, the ones that are most successful, they know their customers, and they listen to their customers, they customize for them. Like, I'm a big Starbucks fan, I love coffee, right? So in the morning, I look at my Starbucks app, which, by the way, the friend who encouraged me to be a teacher is the one who designed that Starbucks app.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I tap on that app. It knows who I am, where I am, what the nearest Starbucks is. It knows what I've drank in the past, and I can customize it however I want. And when I click on it, it'll tell me which location, and it'll be ready when I get there. That's customization. So how great would it be if we really knew our students well at a personal level, and we knew what their passions and interests and talents were, and then we designed engaging experiences around that to bring out the best in what they do, instead of going around and figuring out what are you not good at, and I'm going to make you spend all your time on things that you're not good at, and so tapping into that interest, right? And so we have to think about that experience. And so if we could think about a child's day, they wake up in the morning, do they have a healthy breakfast or not? Was the bus driver nice when they picked them up? Did they welcome them? What was that like? What was the experience like on the bus? Were they greeted when they came into school? Or was it nobody there? Where did they go after that? And was that a good experience? Like, did they were in a holding tank, or did they get to go into a classroom? Who was the teacher that was there, and what's that environment look like? And then what were the learning experiences? Like, if you go and sit for a day and you do passive learning as an adult, you will go nuts after a day. If we can think through the eyes of our students, to the degree we can do that, that does not mean we give authority of the school to the kids. That's not what that means. We're the adults. We still have to be the adults. We still have to manage a school. We have to have safety, and there are certain things all kids have to learn. But if we attend to those interests, if we attend to those learning styles, then they're going to be more engaged, and everything improves. Student discipline improves, but more importantly, they love learning, right? They're going to go out in the real world and they're going to have a passion for what they're doing. So maybe it won't be they wait till their junior year of high school like I did to really love learning. Hopefully they catch it early, and then it's really about that learning.
As well, and there's going to be a legacy from Kevin Brown, what he's done with education. It's true. So what do you hope that is? I mean, obviously it's about you're changing the way education looks in Alamo Heights, but then, and I know you're obviously a huge advocate for public education and what you believe about that. What do you hope when you look back that you can say, this is what was the result?
What would be my legacy? Well, first of all, I hope I have one, right? I think that's why we're all here, is so we can have an influence. So I think one is just wanting to make a difference. So I think I used to have this conversation like, I don't want to just be another rat in the rat race. I want to make a difference somehow, and you don't have to do a lot to make a difference. Like, I think you can do it in little ways. But the big things for me that are the most important, the first is public education. And I frame that always. I'm a government major, history minor, taught government and economics and history, is the importance of public education in our democracy and the originality of that in our country. And I go back to this. Our founding fathers believed so much about the importance of education of all for the success of a democracy. And we were, and Alexis de Tocqueville, the Frenchman, comes from France in the early 1800s to study what's unique about America, because France is starting to go towards a democracy. So he writes this huge book, Democracy in America. And he says, it's the provisions for public education which from the very first set into clearest relief the originality of American civilization. Think about that. From the very first, the provisions of education for public education are what make America original. It's what separated us from Europe, and where you had the haves and the have-nots. So you provide public education because in a republic where the citizens are in control, they have to be educated. And you have to educate all people. Now that's a journey, right? So at that time, that didn't mean all people, right? Yeah. Those were words, but it didn't mean that. So we've been on this journey. So it used to be white male property owners, right? And now it's evolved to be men and women. It's been people of all different races and religions. It's people who are special needs as well as those who don't have special needs. So it's been all people. But the success of our country has largely been dependent on the success of public education. And so I'm a huge defender of public education, and I believe that the elementary school is the smallest unit of democracy in our country, right? Because you have an elected board of trustees, and there's no other unit of our elected officials that serves a smaller geographic area than an elementary school. Yeah. Not a fire department, not a police department, not a post office, nothing. And so our elementary schools are like the canary in the mine. And so goes our elementary schools, and our connected and engagement there goes the health of our country and our democracy. That's my personal belief, but I believe it really strongly. And I believe that public education has been doing a great job. I think we've never been more successful than we are today. And I think that people don't recognize that success enough. Our graduation rates are the highest in the history of our country. We have kids doing more and more. Like, you don't just all of a sudden have all these innovative companies in the world, like all these name brand companies in America, without having had success in your education system. And my greatest fear is that our country is trying to go the way of some of these dictatorships where it's all about standardized testing and standardizing the learning experience. Those countries don't have name brand companies like we do. They test well, but they don't educate everybody. And so I think we have to do a better job of telling the story of public education. So however, as much as I believe in the importance of public education, and as much as I think there's great stories and great things that need to be told, I also believe firmly that we have to transform public education and change from a factory model to one that's customized for children and that's personalized for them and prepares them for a 21st century. And that's a big shift. And so on the one hand, I want to compliment, and on the one hand, I got to say, we have got to change to be relevant. We've got to change, and we have to do that quickly. And we have to do it together, right? Like, it's not just enough for Alamo Heights to do it or for, any other individual school district to do it. Like, we have to partner with each other and learn from each other. So this classroom right here, you've taken a factory model classroom, you've turned it into an engaged classroom, you've done a whole lot of neat things. But what happened in here was a combination of us working with people like you, going out to other school districts to visit and see what they're doing and networking with one another, and being humble enough to know that, well, we didn't know how we're, like 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know what we were going to do. I was worried about this. And we had a million conversations. So we just started going out and looking at other schools. And so this is a compilation of a whole lot of districts across the state, a little nuggets that we learned from each of them, but it's very uniquely Alamo Heights. So to the degree that we can be a part of that at a larger level, right? We have this vision with TASA about transforming schools for the 21st century. I believe very much in that, and I believe very much in spreading that word. And so every district's going to be in a different place in that journey, but we all have to march in a journey for transformation, not reformation. Like, you can't reform schools enough to fit the 21st century, right? It's like trying to take a square peg and put it in a round hole, right? Or vice versa, because you just can't do that. You can't reform it enough. And that's my big criticism of standardized tests. Standardized tests tell me nothing about excellence in the 21st century. You pass that test and I know nothing. I don't know your ability to go to college and be successful. I don't know your ability to be an entrepreneur. I don't know your ability to be kind or to work with other people. I don't know your passion for learning. I don't know anything about you going out into society or being prepared to be a citizen of the world. And if I gear all of our learning towards that, then I've failed the students in this community and in this school district. And as a state and nation, I think we fail our kids when we focus on a standardized test. We have to be much more about this. In fact, standardization is the opposite of what we should be doing as a country. Right? No other profession is out there trying to standardize what they do, where they say, oh, you know, ask Google about standard. Do you have a standard there, or Apple, or even in Toyota and companies like that? They're not standardizing. They're learning organizations. Even the military is a learning organization. They're not trying to standardize the experiences for their soldiers. We got to go to Fort Sam and here in San Antonio, see all the amazing work that they're doing to be more of a learning organization. And so schools have to do that, and you can't do it through standardization. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it is. I have one more very heavy question for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
So, speaking of culture, and you mentioned, we talk about actually kind of 3 things leaders do: model the culture, which you do, and you model that by creating the environment, etc. Measuring the culture, which you were talking about, recognition, and all this, and then mentoring, which you've talked about as well. So one way that some of those behaviors are determined is by policy protocol. So are you a jeans superintendent or a non-jeans? Everybody wants to know about jeans.
Yeah, right. So here's our dress code in Alamo Heights: clean, safe, and decent.
Is that for students and
for
teachers?
everybody?
For everybody. Okay.
Yep, clean, safe, and decent. So I don't major in the minors. Okay. And in my career as an administrator, I've never had a parent complain about the way somebody's dressed. I've had them complain about their kids being bored. I've had them complain about the way their kids were treated. I've had them, all these other things that are on the parents' concern list. Those are the things I want to attend to. I want to give them great relationships with kids, great experiences learning. The other thing will take care of itself. Clean, safe, and decent.
Well, thank you so much for
your
time and talking today, and just
this was fun.
For everything you're doing for public ed. I think it's fantastic. I think it's very needed.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more on the topic of public ed. One of the things I like to say too is, people are so focused on right now, it seems like, because you can customize your world, just basically getting the perspective that matches the perspective they already have.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why I feel like public ed is so important. It's the one place you can come together and learn from people that have different perspectives all in one location. We heard that from your students today.
Absolutely.
Too, being able to learn from different people's discoveries, and I do feel like that's also a bedrock of our democracy. If people start to choose something different, they're going to choose to be with people just like them, and then our democracy falls apart. So,
one of our core beliefs in the district is that diversity enhances life.
Absolutely.
And that experience of being around somebody with different perspectives, different race, different religion, different culture, whatever it may be, is a life skill.
That's right.
And that's a work world we're going to put our kids into.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just around kids that are like you, then you're not going to be able to be successful, but our country won't either, right? Because we don't understand each other. And I do think that that's one of the huge benefits of public education. But this has been fun, and we appreciate our partnership with you guys too, because y'all really helped us a huge amount, and we couldn't do it by ourselves, and we knew that. And so part of this was being humble enough to say, we need some help on this, because we don't really know how to do this part of it right. So we appreciate that very much.
Well, we're honored to be your partner.
Yep.
Love seeing it in action today.
Great.
It's fantastic. So,
Thanks, Shannon.
Thanks.